there's a friend of mine who's got a great saying about creating a company, which is trying to build a company and have it succeed is like eating glass and staring into the abyss. So, I mean, what tends to happen is it's sort of quite exciting for the first several months of starting a company, and then reality sets in. Things don't go as well as planned. Customers aren't signing up. The technology or the product isn't working as well as you thought. And then that can sometimes be compounded by a recession, and it can be very, very painful for several years. So I think. Frankly, starting a company, I would advise people to have a high pain tolerance.
My thinking is that, you guys remember, if you want to be successful, learn from the other people's mistakes. Don't learn from the successful stories. Successful stories they make, don't listen to that. There are a lot of reasons behind it. Just like, I remember the first time Harvard Business School came to us, say, Jack, we want to write a case study for you. That's years 2001 or 2000. They came, they spent 1 week and they write a report and I read, I said, this is not me. And they said, this is you. I said, no, this is not us. He said, this is you. So they make up his sign and the case study go up and they start to teach in a lot of universities. The next 5 years, they invited me to go to the case study, and they always find a competitor of my company. And after every case study, Alibaba will die, that company will succeed. All the students agree. And actually, every 5 years, all the competitors die, we still survive. So how can you study this kind of a successful story? Learn from the mistakes, the other people. No matter how smart you are, you will encounter these mistakes. You learn from mistakes not because you will be able to avoid mistakes. You will able to, when these mistakes come, this suffer comes, you know how to deal with it, how to face it. The book I want to write, if I can, is Alibaba 1001 Mistakes. This is the most treasurable things that in my life. In my life, it's not how much we achieved. It's how much we go through the tough days and mistakes. And this is what, if you start to think now, it'll be good.
Growing up, my dad used to encourage my brother and me to fail. So at the dinner table, he would actually ask us, what did you fail at this week? And if we didn't have something to tell him, he would actually be disappointed. And I can remember coming home from school and being like, Dad, I tried out for this and I was horrible. And he'd be like, way to go, and high-five me. And it was such a gift what he was doing. I didn't realize it at the time, but he was redefining failure for me. And so failure became not about the outcome, but about not trying. And so, the fear of failure, as we all know as entrepreneurs, is one of the greatest fears in life. It's one of the things that stops us in our tracks and keeps us from trying something. And so I incorporate that in my philosophy at Spanx. We celebrate failures, we talk about them. We have oops meetings where I'll announce the oops that I have, and sometimes we have fun with it. We'll even attach theme songs to our oops and we'll play them in front of the whole company. But I think it's just so important to try to get the people that you work with to take risks and to be entrepreneurial and not live in a place of, I want to protect my job and feel like I'm not safe if I make mistakes.
I spent an unusual amount of time with my grandparents, and especially with my grandfather on the ranch. So he had a ranch in South Texas. And I would spend my summers there from age 4 to 16. And when I was 4, they were taking me for the summer to kind of give my parents a break, sort of because they were so young. And it was useful. I was a handful, I'm sure. And anyway, he created the illusion for me when I was 4 years old that I was helping him on the ranch, which of course could not have been true, but I believed it. And then by the time I was 16, of course, I was actually helping on the ranch. I can fix prolapsed cattle. We did all of our own veterinary work. Some of the cattle even survived. And we fixed windmills and laid, water pipelines and built fences and barns and fixed the bulldozer that you guys talked about. And so one of the things that's so interesting about that lifestyle and about my grandfather is he did everything himself. He didn't call a vet if one of the animals was sick. He figured out what to do himself. And
so what does it mean? No delegation?
Being resourceful, I think, is that you can't, if there's a problem, there's a solution. And of course, as you mature and get into the business world and anything you do on a team, you very quickly realize that it's not about just your own resourcefulness, it's about team resourcefulness and how does that work. And
Ted Williams wrote a book called The Science of Hitting, and in it he had a picture of himself at bat and the strike zone broken into, I think, 77 squares. And he said if he waited for the pitch that was really in his sweet spot, he would bat 400, and if he had to swing at something on the lower corner, he would probably bat 235. And in investing, I'm in a no-called strike business, which is the best business you can be in. I can look at 1,000 different companies, and I don't have to be right on every one of them or even 50 of them. So I can pick the ball I want to hit. And the trick in investing is just to sit there and watch pitch after pitch go by and wait for the one right in your sweet spot. And if people are yelling, swing you bum, ignore them. There's a temptation for people to act far too frequently in stocks simply because they're so liquid. Over the years, you develop a lot of filters. And I do know what I call my circle of competence. So I stay within that circle, and I don't worry about things that are outside that circle. Defining what your game is, where you're going to have an edge, is enormously important.
Steve Jobs cared a little bit too much about how perfect the edges of some polygon were, right? What is it that you care too much about?
Connecting everyone. No, seriously, if you think about, it's like this aesthetic sense of the world that I have is that communities of people can channel their energy to do great things, and having connections between people is the infrastructure for the world to do that. And that's why at each step along the way, when there was always all this uncertainty about, whether it would be profitable or whether it would make sense or be good or whatever, to do these things, we always were doing it because we just cared more. And to this day, you could say that was a startup thing, but it isn't, because now we're here and we connect more than 1 billion people, but we're pouring tons of money and resources into connecting people who can't even afford internet access, right? So, that's there's no way that that's going to be profitable in the near term or medium term, but we're doing it because we think it's the right thing to do, and over the long term, I do think that there's something there and it's going to be fundamentally important for the world, and maybe we'll get rewarded, maybe not, but we just really care.
Everybody is feeding yourself on the hysteria and the negativity. You gotta stay in the light. But one of the reasons why I was so excited is about A Wrinkle in Time, because the message is that the darkness is spreading so fast these days. You must become a warrior of the light. And the reason that's so meaningful to me is because that's how I've led my whole life. And every moment in that film, I just felt like, I'm just saying what I normally say.
It's true.
and for these times, the darkness is there to show you your light. Look at what has happened. So if you put the focus on, look at what happened with the darkness that showed up in Parkland, and the darkness that showed up on the streets of Ferguson, and the darkness that showed up in many homes in Chicago with shootings and senseless murders. It brings out the best in people. It brings out the best. And so that's what it's there. We live on a planet where there is darkness and light. What I deeply believe is not that do unto others as you would have them do unto you. What you do is already done. That moment in The Color Purple where she says, everything you ever tried to do to me, where Whoopi says that, Celie, everything you even try to do to me, already done to you. So the law The third law of motion in physics says that what you're putting out is coming back all the time, regardless of whether you know it or acknowledge it or not. So you got to stay as a warrior of the light.